Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the City Council Planning Committee work session, the second one in residential renter barriers and concerns. I will first open it up. I would like everybody to introduce themselves. My name is Gene Knutson. I'm the chair of this committee, along with Councilwoman Barker and Councilmember Hamill. Rick Sepler from the Planning Department, so we'll go ahead and start there.
I'm Adrienne Solenberger, the Landlord Liaison for the Whatcom Homeless Service Center and Opportunity Council.
Thank you.
Phyllis McKee, landlord, have been for several years, but I don't work for any corporation other than myself.
Low overhead.
High maintenance.
I'm Doug White, owner of Windermere Property Management, high maintenance.
Thank you, Doug. Also with us is Brian Heinrich from the Mayor's Office and Kurt Nabafeld from the Planning Department. April, you want to say a few words?
Yeah, and we may have Kim from Landmark. She might just be running a little bit behind schedule. Thank you, everybody, for coming. We also have Peter getting ready to sit down. He's with the legal department. This is an informal work group. We've already had one session in our last meeting. At that time, we brought forward the people that are working with renters to understand what are these concerns that we've been hearing about in snippets at public comment. We got an idea that there's some operational concerns around source of income discrimination, amount of fees that are required up front, as well as understanding the tenant landlord laws. That's pretty much the takeaway that we had there. In order to understand the whole picture, we've done yet another committee inviting people that work on the side of trying to get people placed into housing and of the housing management itself. And again, just to have an informal conversation around these issues so we can understand it a little bit better. Does that work?
Yeah.
Okay.
We can start with you, if you don't mind.
So I place a lot, or tried to help cultivate as many housing opportunities as I can for our chronic homeless population, veteran population. And I would say definitely within our community, seeing some discrimination towards income, specifically with the different kinds of subsidies, is very common. And I don't there's a lot of solutions, and I think that we can talk about, but a large part of it is just going to be coming together as a community and bridging relationships with landlords to talk about how to kind of provide more access.
Oh, anybody have any questions?
Oh, I did want to ask, because there was some questions that came in from constituents, and you might be the best person to understand this, that there was concerns amongst landlords that if they were required to not have source of income discrimination, say they were no longer allowed to say, I don't take Section 8, that the concern is that they would have to lower their rent to accommodate a Section 8, somebody using Section 8 vouchers. Is that correct? Or my understanding is a person can certainly use more of their income toward housing and the Section 8 voucher. So can you clarify that confusion that there is out there right now?
Yeah, I wish someone from the Housing Authority was here because it's most appropriate really for them. But they can, with the Section 8 voucher, contribute more of their income, from my understanding as well. I think that the feasibility of doing that is very limited. When you get $735 a month, spending 40% of your income isn't feasible. So, yeah.
Go ahead, Phyllis.
Well, I've been a landlord for a long time. In fact, my first rental house I bought when I was in college, and I've just been adding to that since then. I don't have a huge number. I have some multi-family here, single family in Bellingham, and speaking to the minimum income, I tend to use 30% as a guideline, and mainly for that, I found that tenants get into trouble if they are spending more of their income on rent, and then they can't afford food or things for their children. I've negotiated with people who've been in those situations, and it's very difficult for both sides. And is the expectation that the landlord would pick up the slack, or is it the expectation that Section 8 would pick up the slack? I've had some good and bad experiences with Section 8, but when it comes down to it and the tenant's doing damage or just decides they're not going to pay their share, to get them out and then to get somebody else in and clean up the place and make it suitable is something that the burden comes back to the landlord. And so I just would be interested to hear what's going on, and I'm happy to respond to anything that's being said.
Okay. Go ahead, Doug.
Well, we have, personally, I have a lot of experience with rentals as well. It goes way back till just after college days. And personally, I own a mobile home park and an apartment complex and some single-family units, which keeps me in touch with a lot of the decisions that have to be made by landlords. And it's pretty much a hands-on issue for me and my wife. As far as HUD or Bellingham Housing Authority subsidies, I think that there is an opinion out there from many landlords that the housing authority would be difficult to work with when it comes time to separate from the tenant. If the tenant has not kept up the rental, it's hard to work with the housing authority to get any of the security deposit that's been put down to go towards those expenses. And after a number of years of that kind of conflict, word gets around, and the landlords just are backing away from it. We had one landlord that presented us with a letter from their insurance company, and they said if you have more than 10% of your doors rented to the housing authority and other subsidies, then we're not going to insure you. And so
Over 10%,
I think it's coming from a few different directions here. Yes, they actually quoted the 10%. The particular structure that they were talking about was about 47 units, and it was 25% housing at the time. And the owner sent us notice to reduce it to 10% by the time of the next insurance renewal, or else he's going to have problems with his insurance coverage. So, you know, there's just the input is kind of coming back around to the tenant, and not necessarily the tenant's fault. If the tenant has damage that's beyond normal wear and tear, and the owner wants to be compensated for it, the housing authority has been resistant. I hate to say anything much like my neighbor here, because they're not here to defend themselves. But you might want to pursue that issue as well.
Okay, questions? Go ahead, April.
Yeah, well, one, thank you for coming in and for your candor on this. I think exactly like you were saying, it's to build the relationships for us to understand what do we need to get involved in as a legislative body. If we do, what is that going to look like, and making sure that we don't have any unintended consequences. And then I think also what maybe doesn't need legislation but needs a lot more education. So if you weren't willing to come to the table, and I know that that's difficult being a landlord myself, but I think that it's important that we all have this conversation, because we all want to see everybody succeeding in Bellingham, and nobody wants to purposely not give somebody housing for any reasons that's discriminatory. But I think in order for us to make legislation, we really just have to have these deep conversations to understand things like, clearly we need to have somebody come in from the insurance companies to understand what are they telling other landlords that are owning larger amounts. I think the other concern that I heard from other landlords, and I don't know exactly, you might be able to answer this question, is that Section 8 voucher, and I know we're only talking right now, we keep mentioning Section 8, but there's several other, I think Social Security as well as Veterans Assistance, comes in at a certain time of the month, and there was concerns from some landlords that if they have to pay their mortgage or things are due on the 5th, and that's what it says for the tenant, and it's coming in on the 15th, that can be a concern. Have you had that concern? And if so, how do you get around that when you're placing?
So you're correct in saying that there are a variety of different types of subsidy provided within our community, and I think that they're very hard to understand. In my last 2 months, I've been going around to local landlords to kind of educate. Going back to that original question you asked about, can someone pay more towards housing with their subsidy? Only with Section 8 is that possible.
Is your microphone on?
I think so, mine.
Okay,
too
get a
far.
little closer to it.
Sorry.
Maybe Maria will turn it up.
There are other subsidies in place also honored through the BHA or provided through the BHA, like VASH, housing and shelter plus care, where an individual is not allowed to contribute more than that, 30% of their income. And then the question about income coming in, disability does come in anywhere between the 1st and the 3rd. And that part of it, I have not seen myself as being a huge barrier for landlords, especially if they know upfront and ahead of time. I think it's when subsidy payments come in late. And there's some effort, I know, for that to be rectified as well. And specifically through the Opportunity Council for them to transition to EFT payments.
Dan?
I'm trying to get a sense of the universe of people that we're talking about here on any type of rental assistance, whether it be TBRA, tenant-based rental assistance, VASH, Shelter Plus Care, or Section 8. How many people in the city of Bellingham? Do you have an approximate number of?
I really wish I did. I don't have an approximate number, though.
Are we talking about 1,000 people? Or are we talking about 10,000 people?
Yeah, I mean, at least 1,000 people would be receiving some sort of rental assistance, yeah. And that can be anything from HEN, like you said, to VASH, to SSVF, which is another veteran assistance. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Well, there's quite a community of support here in Bellingham, which is wonderful. It's one reason we all love living here, I think, is there are people that are willing to help. Even our company, we sometimes when it just seems like somebody standing before us with, a mom, single parent with children that are hanging on her, and she just doesn't have the money, and she doesn't have the time to look for it. We look at that as an urgent matter, and we take care of it. Often we just give them money to cover what they need to have covered, whether it's a month's rent or not, and it's unconditional. They don't have to return it. Or we tell them, make sure you do this for someone else down the road. But and that kind of I think concern and participation in the community is widespread, really. Some of our landlords they want to put as many housing authority people in as they can. Like we have a 97 unit over in the Alabama neighborhood, and that gentleman is just an angel. So there are wonderful landlords out there. I don't know how many real problems we have with landlords because I don't track that, but we do track a lot of information, and I have all the last year's vacancy reports that we do for a number of financial institutions and others that do research, and I've given that to Gene so that he can make copies for you. And I have a list here that we hand out to our tenants of resources and outreach programs. I won't read it all, but the Opportunity Council has 6 just different programs, including VA, which was brought up a minute ago, and housing for essentially needy, Shelter Plus Care, etc. And we have the Bridge program, we have the Lydia Place, we have Salvation Army, we have a litany of churches that help, including Watcom Dream and Interfaith Coalition, Bellingham Housing Authority, of course, Northwest Regional Council on Aging, Lummi Tribal Assistance, Red Cross. We have a lot of support here for folks. And if we're looking for a source to provide funds for folks that are falling through the cracks, well, this is quite a comprehensive list. I'm not sure that you all even have this, so I've given a copy to Gene as well. If you want the landlords, what this sounds like, if I can just insert this at this point, the landlords that we're hearing from are saying, what are they doing at the city now? They just got used to the inspection program. You mean to say we have to give loans to people who can't afford to pay their security deposit and or their application fee? And we have a hard enough time collecting funds from people who do a lot of damage and their security deposit is used up, and then we have to figure out a way that they can pay over time for the damage that was done. This is there's a lot of folks in the community that are collecting money through donations that put it towards the housing question. And a lot of them are named off just now. So we're wondering, where is this going, do you think? What is the real goal that the city has in this committee to address?
Go ahead, Dan.
Okay, thanks for asking that question. I appreciate that. So I think what's under consideration here are policies that are geared towards source of income discrimination. So what I don't want to see is a veteran who is using a VASH voucher being discriminated against in housing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
What I don't want to see is a person with a disability using some type of tenant-based rental assistance to be discriminated against in housing. So source of income discrimination, that's that broad umbrella. The second component that's under consideration here is some type of easing a person's ability to enter into a rental agreement through spreading let's say the last month's rent, or perhaps a security deposit, although I think that's under question at this point, across several months' payment at the front end of the rental agreement. So instead of having to come up with several $1,000s at one time, maybe it's $1,000 or some other number. I think those are the two pieces that I am considering. So spreading the cost of moving in and the source of income discrimination, those are the two pieces that I'm considering at this point.
Well, thank you for pinpointing that. I just want to say that we do have those issues from time to time. Somebody comes in and starts a lease the middle of the month, and we want to have that payment in advance, of course, for the second half of the month, plus their security deposit. And sometimes it's too much. So we talk to the landlord, and we tell them the tenant qualifies, but they just don't have the funds to finish this transaction. And we get 9 times out of 10, we get support from the owner. Well, then just charge them for the remainder of this month, and then they don't have to pay the rest till the first of the next month. Those kinds of deals are being made all the time. They do exist. It is necessary to do that from time to time, but the landlords aren't forced to. If you come back from the committee and say, well, this is something we want to make code, this is something that they have to do, it just puts a whole different twist on it. I hope we don't move away from this sense of community that we have here because of a legislation like this. So just a thought.
Phyllis, you want to comment?
I would
on-
agree with 100% with what's being said here. And I have found that with Section 8 is the only one of the various organizations I've dealt with. The trouble becomes when the tenant is breaking the lease for one way or another. Either they're not paying their share, or they're doing damage. A lot of times it comes because of a breakup, a separation from people who moved in under Section 8. Somebody moves out, leaves one person there. It gets to be very chaotic, but Section 8, at least in my opinion, a couple times that I have dealt with them, has not been very supportive in that regard. And I'm a little dubious about not collecting deposits and last month's rent up front. I found that when I do that, I have a more successful tenant relationship because they are already committed. Otherwise, once you're involved with the contract with the person, then the next month they're supposed to be making an extra payment toward their deposit or their last month's rent, and they just don't have it. So then you're caught with a domino effect, and that's where the issues get, I think, for a lot of us. As it's being said, we negotiate deals with tenants all the time, who get behind, but you have to have some confidence that they are capable of getting on top of it and not just stringing you out for more, free rent. I just am in the process right now. I just finished up evicting at one person who was living, and they weren't under any assistance, but she moved out, declared she had no responsibility anymore. He was there. He misrepresented himself on his application, did not have the job he said he had, and then just decided to stop paying because it would take me longer. He would have at least 3 months free rent while I pursued him legally, and my attorney fees about $1,500, and then besides the rent that I didn't collect, and then he trashed the place and left garbage there. These are the things that I would like to see support for landlords in having to deal with this, not taking those kinds of things away. I mean, if we did, now I had a deposit from him, but it won't cover nearly what he's done. Yeah, and so I just caution you from coming up with something that's going to make it so unattractive to have rentals that people just decide not to do it anymore. And you want to be really careful with that.
Well, I think just to go back to the very beginning, that that's why we're having this process. Typically, what I've seen in my short tenure, a year and a few months on council, is we start hearing a lot from the community that's concerned through public comment. We either bring it forward and ask staff to bring something to address that situation legally through legislation, whatever it is, or we don't respond to it, and then we're brought with the public solution. And then we're kind of on our heels trying to figure out, okay, how do we get all the stakeholders together, and now there's misinformation out there. So that's what this process is. We're always making a list of questions to find out what do we need to get at our next work session to really understand. We have Mark right now, our legislative assistant, is looking at what other cities have done and what are those unintended consequences that came out of it. What are some of the benefits that weren't expected that also came out of it as well. I think beyond source of income discrimination and the amount required up front, there's concerns about month-to-month leases. There's some advocacy out there for a minimum of 3 months to allow people to get in and feel confident with that at least 3-month period. There's also there's their education component. Does it need to be legislated? The Tenant Landlord Act. As people move in, do we need to say, with your rental registration, you need to post what that is too, or give people access? So those are also things that have been brought to us that we're also trying to figure out. Where can we find agreement on what we can do through education and making sure that's available for people, and then how far do we need to go with legislation to ensure that there's equity across the system so that equality in housing can happen.
Can I just provide some pieces of knowledge? When it comes to subsidy programs, Shelter Plus Care specifically is the one subsidy program that does not allow for double deposits to be paid out to landlords. It's also the hardest subsidy that I've worked with to house someone with. I'm much more successful with the other number of subsidies that he mentioned previously, because they allow not just a double deposit, but because it comes with wraparound services often, where we have individuals engaged in case management programs or other supportive services. Another thing to speak to the damages components, many communities in other areas adopt a mitigation fund and provide some money to be used so that when landlords endure expensive damages, which I have seen, there's a fund out there that helps provide them with support. And protecting those relationships with landlords is what really enables us to continue that relationship to house people more, because there's a sense of trust on both ends, right, that things can move forward and that the landlord's not stuck with a deficit or a loss.
Well, mitigation fund, if I could speak to that. We have mitigation in the city, a great program here that is free. And mitigation fund, I'm not quite sure. We donate to it to help keep it going. It's a great program. And it sits people down and they spend a lot of time talking to each side to make sure that everybody understands what's really going on. And we do find that there's a lot of confusion usually, and sometimes it was a program that was set up to fail. We don't believe in that at our office, and I'm sure that most every landlord you'll find does not want to put a tenant into a situation economically where they're set up to fail. Unless you're trying to have them learn a lesson in life. Well, if you want them to learn lessons in life, they have to understand that they have to work and save so that they can afford to rent a place. It's all part of the process. If you provide funds for every situation, then what do the skin in the game do they have? I mean, where's the lesson that they're going to learn? It's a complicated humanistic situation here, and you kind of wonder whether or not you should be spending so much time and attention on teaching young people or people that are going through different stages all about budgeting and what it's all about. But what we do there is if we find that that's a possible situation, that there's could be setting somebody up to just fail, again, we don't want that. We want it to be a better experience. Then we recommend that they go to Whatcom Dream and enroll in one of their study groups where they'll teach them about budgeting and teach them how to move from where they are in their poverty level. There's actually lessons that they can teach that people will pick up, and it improves their lives. So it's a great program there. But should the city be legislating that? Right now it's offered. So much is offered. I'm not quite sure how you're going to get from here to where you want to be, but I don't know that the city can provide the kind of protection for everybody, for every situation, because some of them aren't simply ready yet to be tenants. Okay.
Dan?
I'm personally not interested in teaching people life lessons. That's not my role. That's not our role as council. If they want to go to Whatcom Dream, or if that's the appropriate fit for them, that's their choice. What I'm interested in is protecting people from being discriminated against in housing. We absolutely have a housing crisis in this community. We have a rental housing crisis. I think there's no dispute over that. There's an affordable housing crisis when it comes to owning a home. That's absolutely true. I mean, you can look at the Runstead report, or you can look out the window and see what the situation is. So what I'm interested in is protecting veterans that have served our country. I'm interested in protecting seniors in our community, people with disabilities and families with low incomes from being discriminated against. That's what I'm here to examine and consider today, and in future deliberations as well. As it relates to taking the move-in costs and spreading them across a certain amount of months, or whatever that looks like, I'm interested in understanding from your perspective what those impacts are as landlords, what that looks like. I'm also interested in the success of students that come to our community to go study at Western or Whatcom or BTC, who are very challenged when it comes to being able to find a place to live in our community. And those people they're the next generation of leadership here. So I think looking towards their best interests that's in our interests as well.
Most students don't have a job that gives them a resource for paying for housing over a long period of time. Education's costly. They work in the summer, most of them, but most of them don't have credit even yet. So we provide, and I know that the other landlords also provide, a co-signer agreement. So their parents can sign on, or somebody that has credit, a proper amount of credit that would qualify them in the 40%, 30% range of income. And if they qualify, then all students get housing that come through most every program in the city, every rental agency, every landlord. They do a co-signer agreement. One of those is in the packet as well. So I think that a lot of what we're talking about here is a symptom of a greater problem. Providing enough quantity housing in the community. I would like to see the city take a look at encouraging, incentivizing the building of single-family homes, expanding neighborhoods. We look at this ruling that we have right now with the city that we've been living under for, 10 or 12 years now, where if you live on one side of the street, you get city sewer and water. If you live on the other side, you're out of luck. I don't think that's very good use of resources. And if you can take a look at the annexations that are available out there after all the studies and so forth, why is it that those properties aren't annexed into the city so that more housing can be built? More housing built means less cost. Less housing available means the economy is going to drive it up the price. So
April, then back to Dan.
So for those of you that are following this conversation, the reason why we did it in this format is so people that are coming into the conversation in the middle of it can go back and watch. So in our last session at 10:30, you can find that online. We had discussions, and so some of these very things came up. And an outcome of our last committee was that we have two issues here we need to be working on in parallel, and we all agreed that that was the case, and we talked with Rick about that as well, our planning director, that we have an operations component that we need to be looking at and understanding, but then we also have a housing issue that we need to look about. That do we have all the different types of housing that it takes? Because it can't just be multifamily, 40 units per housing structure and then single family detached. There's a middle space there where we need to have people able to move up that housing ladder, that economic ladder. So we're doing our best to work on those in parallel, but also try to separate the conversations a little bit. So we acknowledge that that is a huge concern in the city, and we are going to have our work group on that as well. These particular ones we're trying to keep mostly to the operations side.
Dan.
Thank you, April. I just have one short comment on that, and that I served on the Bellingham Loan Review Board, which is advisory to the council for, oh gosh, a dozen years at least now, and chairman of that committee for most of those years. And I know all of the housing programs that have come in through HUD, all the federal money that came in for subsidized housing in the city, and it continues to be a solid source of funding for the city to participate in, to have this housing come in. And most of that housing, at least a large percentage of the units in those projects, are there for lower income folks. And I think we've done a great job of providing housing through that source here in the city, and there's more on the way. That's really where the easy money is, actually. It's just that it costs so much to go that direction. You have prevailing wage requirements if you're using federal funds, and so it's expensive. But once it gets here, it's here for the purpose of taking care of that segment of the population that you're referring to.
Dan.
Well, I just wanted to address your claim that building more single-family housing would somehow provide a more equity or more affordability in our community. I think that's a dubious assertion. I think that expanding into our UGA and building more housing will not drive down the cost of single-family housing. It's not like we're going to have homes that are suddenly available for $250,000 for everybody. That's just not going to happen. Developers are not building those types of homes. If you look at the building that's done out on the north end of Cordata or on King Mountain, those homes are not affordable for most working class families in Bellingham. That is simply the reality. And the other part of that, I think that is worthy of consideration, is that expanding into the UGA is not free. When we move into the UGA, when we talk about those annexation pieces, we have to do that with serious deliberation and consideration, because when we do that, we are contractually bound to hire firefighters. We are contractually bound to hire police officers, both of which cost about $100,000, slightly more than that, per year, per person. That's not pipes, lights, and roads or parks. That's just personnel when we move into our UGAs. So moving into those areas has to be done with a serious amount of consideration. So that's why I'm proposing that we look at building infilling. One example, and I'll be brief on this. I know I'm going over my time here a little bit.
No, you're on the committee. You can talk all you want.
All right. The Old Town sub-area plan of 2008 calls for 1,000 units of residential housing and 400,000 square feet of commercial development. So that to me sounds like a good idea because we already police that area. We already provide fire service for that area. When we expand out into the UGAs that ring the outer parts of Bellingham from south to north, those services have to be provided. We're under contract. Those contracts have been signed well before I started here. So I don't think that that's the answer. I don't think building more is going to. We can't build our way out of this situation. I think that will help flatten prices to some degree. But we have homeowners that are sitting on their investments because of equity that they don't want to sell, which makes sense. We're not at the top of the market yet. We have a situation that's just. We can't policy our way out of this. I mean, we can do bits and pieces, but we are nibbling around the edges. And building is not the answer. It's not going to get us there.
You know, Daniel, I really appreciate you spending some time mentioning that argument. I don't think we have time here for me to argue each point. And I don't think that's, but it is part of, this is one of the pieces of affordable housing. You look at what's going on with the price of housing now. It's going up, 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 up. Rents are going up because there's less housing available. The single-family homes that were available in large quantity for rentals, especially the older homes and so forth, are now being sold off. This is the time to sell that investment if you want to move your funds on in 1031 and reinvest, or just simply cash in and retire. Now's the time to do it. This year, next year, maybe the year after. Yes, pulling all that housing out of the rental market does affect the price of housing. It's pretty easy to see that graph. I think we should get together and talk about the detail of what you just said, because there might be some misconception there. It's not all that complicated. Yes, you do have to add some utilities and facilities and some services to neighborhoods as they come, but it isn't $100,000 a house. Or, I mean, I think we need to look at the numbers and really see what they say specifically. There's a lot of property out there that's available for multifamily on the edges as well, but certainly single-family developments. Every day we had about 1,600 single-family homes. I mean, goodness. I get 2 to 3 a day the last 4 months that are turning down, taking their houses off the market. Stop, don't want any tenants, putting the house up for sale. That is a termination of tenancy that I get that message every day. I'm sure that all the other property managers in the area are witnessing the same phenomenon. We can put numbers on that for you. I mean, we are highly specialized in our programming right now, our software program, so we can give you all kinds of information. We can even help you with redetermining and updating your impact fees for large apartment complexes, which would actually stimulate, I believe, more investment in apartments, because we can show you that the occupancy averages are much less right now than they were when this study first came out. We want to work with you and help you, but we don't really. We really think that we have to look at the whole picture, and not just focus in on the low income issue. It's there. Have to look at it, but I think it's just a symptom of the bigger problem.
April.
So we leave about 10 minutes at the end for 2 minutes of public comment, and we need to leave about 5 minutes before that to wrap up and determine where we're going to go next. I really appreciate your willingness to come forward, and as we have those separate from operations conversations, you can see where they can eat up quite a bit of time. We'll need to have that in a different area. In a different arena, which will be in the Planning Commission, is my understanding. The Planning Committee, Planning Commission.
Planning Commission will be looking at a lot of the issues that were brought up.
Yeah, there's two
I'll let
separate
you say
things,
something
just
here
so
in a
people
second,
understand. I think that For me to understand in next steps, I have a couple of questions. One is, what I'm hearing is that there, and I don't know if it's low-hanging fruit, is that other than, which we need to understand is there a different eviction process for somebody that's on any kind of subsidy than for people who are not? So we'll need to address that. Maybe you can. Two, if there isn't, is there any reason why we should be not legislating? Is tomorrow, if council wanted to put a policy to say you cannot discriminate against where somebody's income is coming from, knowing that you can fully well say this is more than 30% of your income and it's not going to be successful for you, or this is 50% of your income and that's just not going to be successful for you. So you can still deny, but to just outright deny. So other than the insurance companies that are saying, hey, you have 40 units, you got 25% of them using HUD vouchers or Section 8 vouchers, we want you to bring that down to 10%. So certainly need to get that piece
We need
understood.
to have somebody here from
But
the insurance.
other than that insurance component, can you see any reason why we should allow that discrimination? Yes.
Well, are you talking about just the source of discrimination?
Just the source of income discrimination.
Okay, because what I look at is the income predictable, reliable, and long-term? And if the answer is no to any one of those, then I don't care where it comes from. I mean, well, within reason. but yeah, I don't, and I think a lot of landlords don't discriminate on that, but what they're looking for, is this something that you're getting, you're doing an odd job this month and you're unemployed next month, or the benefits run out in 3 months and so on. And the other thing is, I do have cosigners. I have several college students I rent to, and they all have parent cosigners. And it works out fine.
Yeah, and we'll need to know that as well. I think coming back of what are the source of income, like could you discriminate against having a cosigner? Is that included? Because I know there's some conversation amongst landlords that, well, does that mean that if I allow a student to come in but I make them have a cosigner that also has some funds, would that be source of income discrimination? So we need to add that.
Yeah, don't make it that way.
Yeah, do you?
Go ahead.
I have a lot of thoughts, but I wanted to provide a resource. I want to say for the note that providing a cosigner is not something that most of our unhoused and unsheltered population have access to. Let's be realistic. But if you look into Link Housing Corporation, for the past 31 years, they've looked at inclusionary housing, not just in the form of policy, but in forms of just community model for integrating, like we should say, deconstructing poverty in a community. And if you went to linkhousing.org and researched some of their housing that they've done within their community, I think you'll find some pretty amazing models about protecting landlords, but providing actual access to housing for our low-income and our severe low-income individuals.
Okay, Rick, you wanted to make a comment?
Just a couple.
Turn your microphone on, sir.
Thanks. It's Monday. Thank you. Just a couple of things. The focus today are on 3 issues, as I hear. The first is, as Councilmember Barker just articulated, the discrimination of a source of income, and getting feedback on that and getting our arms around the extent of the problem was also noted by Councilmember Hamill. The second is one we haven't really focused on as much, and that's the issues on condition and repairs and tenants' awareness of their rights. The Landlord Tenant Act and whether it's adequately connected. And we haven't discussed. I'd be interested in your perspective on that, whether your tenants really know the parameters, benefits both the landlord and the tenant if you understand the rules. And the last was the hurdle of coming up with the first, last, and security. So those really are the 3 issues that are focused today. You're exactly right to note affordable housing is linked to homelessness and linked to rental availability. The city is approaching it through a variety of means. We'll be coming before this body this month to talk preliminarily about the urban growth areas and expansion. And we do have a calculus that talks about the cost to all of the community for expansion. We need to be aware of that. And additionally, we have ongoing work that's been done in terms of affordable housing. And council is having an open house and presentation a week from tomorrow, really to talk about the ongoing programs and solicit suggestions on how to do it. I will say that there is no one magic bullet if you assess it. This is not just a Bellingham issue, nor is it just a Washington issue. It's nationwide. And there are no answers that are broad-based. Cities that espouse no development's bad development have no limits on urban growth. Phoenix and Las Vegas have affordable housing crises. And you could build as far out as you wish. So it's not just supply. There's more to the equation. I think we need to get all the information and discuss it. And there will be a separate process, I think, really to do with it. I will say that it's of great importance to the council, to the mayor, and we're focusing as many efforts as we can to try to get our arms around it. But we're not alone. Other cities are wrestling with it and trying to find a way to approach it. And I think you chip away at it to make it the most successful.
Thank you, Rick. I forgot to introduce Mayor Linville joined us. Do you want to say anything, Mayor, while you're here?
I was out speaking to our guests on the lawn,
Okay.
so that was why I was late coming in. No, I just appreciate hearing another perspective, and hopefully this kind of discussion will continue. It's much more fruitful to me sometimes than having you come over there or over there and have you guys sit up there and just hear the comments going back and forth. So I appreciate the conversation.
Okay. We'll open it up now, and then we'll discuss what we'll do. We have 10 minutes or 14 minutes for comment. Is there anybody here that would wish to speak for the committee? Oh, we have a sign-up sheet. I'm sorry. Okay. Gary Peterson, come on down to the microphone over here.
Okay, first, thank you, sir, for bringing this up. I want to talk about the Landlord Tenant Law. People don't understand. The landlord has the rights for everything. This gentleman here brought it up. We haven't even talked about the tenants today. All you've talked about is what's good for the landlords, what's hard for the landlords, how can they recover this. Do you realize if I walk out this door and the mayor wants to be in my apartment, all she has to do is go to my landlord, they give me a 20-day written notice, I'm gone. They don't have to give you a reason why they're evicting you, and you're gone. I used to be disabled. I'm still disabled. I used to use a walker. You probably saw me 2 years ago coming into the council meetings. All I've asked to have people do is offer a 3-month lease, write a resolution, make an amendment or an ordinance that says if you own property in this county, and it's not just Bellingham. I went to this county council. I've been to Everett. I've been to Seattle. I've done a lot of research. I'll be here tonight with my facts for you because I just didn't know how this worked out. And I'm sorry if I'm getting a little nervous, but I'm watching the clock and I'm trying to get all my comments down. But nobody listens to the tenants. 2 years ago in my apartment complex, I put notes on 75-unit complex. I put notes on everybody's door, beginning of summer, company bar, let's have a big barbecue, community get together. You guys said that to the community? BS. There are no communities in these apartments. Landlords have the tenants scared. We wake up every morning at the beginning of the month, open our door, and look for a piece of paper that says you have a 20-day notice to get out. I'd like to know how many people in here, in the audience, have $2,000 to $3,000 in their bank accounts. I can guarantee you none of them do. So Seattle's spending millions of dollars on homeless. We have to do something with the homeless, but you're not doing anything for the people that have been there and pay their rents on time. They're getting out, and then they add to the homeless.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you, Gary. Perry Estridge?
Hello? Oops. Uh-oh. Unprotected speaking. Sorry. My first committee meeting back after about 2 years hiatus. So Perry Eskridge from the Realtors Association. Just a few points that I wanted to put out. The Realtors did meet with the Bellingham Tenants Union, and I got to tell you, that's an interesting group of people. Smart, dedicated, going towards something. The funny thing is we probably agreed on 95% of the issues. I wouldn't necessarily say that this was one of them, but we did see the problems, and we are, willing to work toward that. The one thing I wanted to point out today is I've not really seen an answer to the question, is there a problem? We heard that, yes, there are probably some instances of source of income discrimination, but I don't think we really got to the root of whether or not those numbers justify diving into the city's regulation of private contracts. One of the issues when I was doing research on this today was we have to look at, there's an issue about whether or not there's, actual discrimination going on, or whether or not there's a problem with people being able to use the Section 8 vouchers when they get them because rents are too high. When you look at the Section 8 rents that are available and what's available to be paid to a landlord, those prices don't necessarily match up with what's being charged with rental housing in Bellingham. So that's a really good point to take on. That might be the bigger problem here. So something I wanted to speak about affordable housing. Last week during our GMHB hearing in front of the here, it was suggested that those people in real estate didn't necessarily have as much experience in development as the city does. Well, I can tell you from two perspectives right now, if you just take a look at the new senior housing that's being built by the city down here and do that on a per unit basis and the cost it's doing, your per unit cost is approaching $300,000 per unit. That's not really affordable. And I can tell you in another situation, one of our realtors who was...
Thank you, Barry.
Yeah, sure.
The old timer. Michael Zick.
Hello, I'm Michael Zick. I've lived in this community for 35 plus years.
Michael, can you get closer to the microphone so we can hear you? There you go.
I actually am homeless. I'm currently staying at the drop-in center. My income is, I'm on SSI, about $734 a month. I have a Section 8 voucher. It's about to expire on 6/25. I've tried to use it various places for the person working for Windermere. I've applied for multiple Europe rentals. Each time I've had to pay $40 for an application fee. It would be nice for if you could submit one application and that background check and that application fee is utilized where it's just a one-time thing instead of having to apply and pay individually for each place you offer. That's a very inconvenient thing as well. I've been part of your camp out going on. So I don't consider myself homeless. I'm without shelter. Bellingham is my home, and it's been my home since, as you see, for a very long time. I love this town. I love this community. I love the people in it. And it's one of the most awesome places I've been, and I've been to several places, along the West Coast and Midwest. So I thank you for everything you're doing, Kelly Linville, Mayor, letting us use your facilities. I try to keep it clean, and it went off good. I can't wait for the third annual. Hopefully I'll have housing by then, but I really appreciate this opportunity to speak, there's not a lot of us here, that came inside, but I really appreciate all of you and what you're doing, and for my voice to be heard.
Thank you very much, Michael. Carmen Gilmore? Okay. Well, some people do. That's okay. Nothing wrong with that.
Welcome.
Leslie Shank? Same thing. Ed Morin? Did I say that right? Is it Moran or Moran?
It's Moran.
Moran, thank you.
Well, thank you, everybody. My name is Ed Moran, and I'm here to announce the formation of a new subcommittee of the Homeless Coalition. We call ourselves Homeless Voices, and we are the group who are coordinating the gathering outside. We are unique in that our subcommittee is going to represent the voice of the homeless in Bellingham. Throughout the various meetings, all the organizations have been getting together and talking among themselves about what they see. We are going to provide a second channel, another opportunity and a different perspective of all the things that affect the homeless here in Bellingham. Since the discussions in rental, of course, there's a great deal to discuss. It's a long and storied history between renters and landlords. And you can hear the various problems that we have. The 20-day notice to evict that Gary just mentioned. It's a very real problem. Suddenly your life is turned upside down with a piece of paper on your door. If you don't have the cash flow to move, you don't get the money in 20 days, you're going to the mission. So this is the beginning of a long conversation, and again, I'm just here to announce the formation. I really don't have much to say at this point. But as time goes on, I hope that we apply a little creativity to what we have and make a more effective system for everybody.
Thank you, sir. We are on a listening tour. We're listening to everybody, all sides of the issue, so I appreciate you coming forward and letting us know what's going on out there and going on in your group, so thank you very much.
Great.
The next is Kim Heisinger. Okay. Boy, we get people to sign up and no one else, that's great. The last name on the list is Patricia, how do you say that? Come on down, you could, I'm sorry, I didn't pronounce that right. This is the last speaker too, and then we'll come back in a future date with, yes, we'll have another session. Go ahead.
I'm Patricia Herlevy. It's Finnish. And I've gotten to know the hotels and B&Bs and people's basements with recluse spiders and attics in people's houses, because I've lived in between homes several times. I'm a professional, so I am a journalist. I have a business, and I'm really sick of this town, sorry to say. I moved here because I thought there was a lot of potential here, and I'm really pissed off. So what I would like to see, and I've also been abused psychologically by people, just to let you know that your cops did nothing about it. So I would like to see more land trust, where people can be empowered and create their own situations and not deal with landlords anymore. I would like to see more things like the Coastal Community Land Trust with tiny and small houses, so that you would have to change some of the zoning and coding on that so that that could be allowed. I'd also like to just see, I joined the Bellingham Tenants Union. I want to see what will happen with that. But I really think it's a time of people taking their power back. And I'm probably going to be leading a lot of that, just to let you know.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Say, Gene,
I want to thank you. Go ahead, real quick.
Can I answer a couple of questions here? The gentleman before with the beard, Michael?
Yes.
Michael should have been given an option after he first applied at our office, if that's, I think that's what he was implying, that his application would be good for 90 days. If things change in his background within 90 days, he can come back and we could transfer it to another property. Oftentimes, we do return the $40 fee to people who obviously couldn't qualify, and we return it to them. On the 20-day notice comments we've been hearing, 20 days is a good thing for a lot of tenants to have that option, because if things don't work out for them, they can leave with a 20-day notice. It's the same notice that a landlord can give them to leave. They don't have to give a reason to leave either. The landlord doesn't have to give a reason for not continuing if they need to stop the tenancy. So the state decided in their wisdom that a lease is good and a 20-day notice is a good option for both sides from time to time. That's the reason it's on the books.
Okay. Go ahead, April.
Yeah, so thank you again
I'd like
for...
to say one thing
Go
about
ahead,
the 20-day
Phyllis.
notice. That just gets the wheels starting. I just went through this. And if the person doesn't move, then you're into an eviction process, and that can drag on and on and on. And I also would, I've been a landlord for years. I've never been able to successfully intimidate a tenant. I mean, the weight is really on their side. They are supported by the law in many ways. And everybody talks about 20 days as though they're going to evaporate out of the unit in 20 days. That doesn't happen. That just starts the process. You hire the attorney. You have to drag them to court. They don't show up. You get a default. They still stay there. You have to hire the sheriff to come and throw them out. These are all things that are not being mentioned here, that are all part of that process. And the tenant can make a choice to cooperate or not at any one of those places.
Okay, we're going to bring this to close. April?
Yeah, thank you so much for coming and everybody for watching. If you haven't come into the first part of the conversation, I strongly suggest that you go back, watch the first session, watch this session. We'll continue to build off those as we find out what our next steps are. We will be having another work session on this. Also, I really want to thank, and I want people to give a lot of leeway to the landlords that were willing to come forward and have this conversation. It's very easy being an elected, whenever you make yourself available, you tend to get beat up and you're the one that's really trying to be available to help make solutions. So I would just ask that we have that patience, and we're extremely thankful that you were willing to come forward and to offer to continue to come forward to have these very difficult conversations that sometimes we just throw solutions at and we don't take the time to understand. I would like to leave with your position is extremely valuable and important, and if you wouldn't mind giving your contact information so that people at home or landlords that might be interested in working with you to get people housed.
Yes, so I can be reached at 360-603-0377. My email is very long, but Adrienne is ADRIENE_Solenberger, SOLENBERGER, at WhatcomHSC.org. And I do work with landlords to help when we have what they would call problematic situations in developing housing retention plans and connecting tenants with resources so they don't have to become homeless.
Thank you.
Okay, I want to thank everybody again. We will be meeting in the future after the committee decides our next step.